There was a time when Las Vegas wasn't just about gambling, it was about glamour soul and a kind of magic you couldn't find anywhere else. Back in the 1950s and 1960s, the Strip came alive with neon lights, velvet lounges, and the sounds of Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Elvis Presley echoing through showrooms. Casinos like the Sands, the Stardust, the Desert Inn, and the Dunes weren't just buildings. They were cultural landmarks, living symbols of an America chasing dreams under the desert sky. This was Old Vegas, a city built on style, entertainment, and a sense of belonging. But if you walk the Strip today, that world is gone. The iconic casinos have been reduced to rubble, replaced by glass towers that feel less like legends and more like corporate fortresses. The magic has been sanitized, the history erased, and the soul of Vegas sold off for quarterly profits. The Strip didn't just evolve, it betrayed its own history. So here's the question. What killed Old Vegas? Was it inevitable modernization, or was it a deliberate choice by corporations and Wall Street to wipe out the very culture that made the city famous? In this video, we'll dig into the golden age of Old Vegas, the corporate takeover, the undeniable proof of betrayal, the impact on the community, and whether any piece of that lost history can ever be revived. Stay with us, because the death of Old Vegas isn't just a story about a city. It's a story about what happens when history itself is sacrificed for profit. To understand the death of Old Vegas, you first have to see how alive it once was. After World War II, Las Vegas exploded into an oasis of neon and opportunity. What had been a dusty desert town transformed almost overnight into a stage for the most glamorous show on earth. By the 1950s and 1960s, the Strip had become a glittering boulevard of icons. The Sands Hotel was the heart of the action, where the Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr. turned late-night shows into legendary events. At the Stardust, guests marveled at productions that rivaled Broadway. The Desert Inn offered elegance, while the Dunes promised exotic fantasies. Every resort had its own identity, and together, they created an atmosphere that felt larger than life. But what made Old Vegas special wasn't just the stars, it was the accessibility. A factory worker from Cleveland or a school teacher from Kansas could book a cheap room, enjoy a prime rib dinner for a few dollars, and end up sitting in the same showroom as celebrities. Vegas gave ordinary Americans the chance to feel extraordinary. As one tourist recalled years later, it wasn't about money, it was about magic. The entertainment was world-class. Elvis Presley turned the International Hotel into his personal kingdom in the late 1960s, performing sold-out shows that drew fans from around the globe. Lounge acts filled every corner of the Strip, from comedians to jazz musicians, creating a soundtrack that never stopped. This was a city where every night felt like an event, where the energy never dipped, and where the neon glow itself seemed to pulse with life. The style of Old Vegas was equally unforgettable. Neon signs towered above the desert, each casino competing to shine brighter to pull you inside. The Stardust's massive electric sign, the Flamingo's pink glow, the Sahara's dessert theme. All of it blended into a spectacle that defined the city's image. It was gaudy, it was loud, it was unapologetic, and it was authentic. Old Vegas was also a community. The city's workforce, dealers, servers, entertainers, were proud to be part of something bigger than themselves. Locals often rubbed shoulders with tourists, and there was a sense that Vegas belonged to everyone. Whether you had $50 or $50,000, you could carve out your own experience. That inclusivity gave the city its heartbeat. By the mid-20th century, Vegas wasn't just a destination, it was a symbol. Hollywood movies showcased it, musicians sang about it, and the world looked at the Strip as proof that America could build something dazzling in the middle of nowhere. For many, Old Vegas represented freedom, glamour, and the thrill of reinvention. But that golden age was fragile. Beneath the neon lights, cracks were forming. As the decades turned, the small, personality-driven casinos that gave Vegas its soul would face pressure from forces far larger than themselves. And soon the Strip that had once celebrated its history would begin erasing it brick by brick. The end of Old Vegas didn't happen overnight. It came gradually as the city shifted from a playground built on personality to a machine run by corporations. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the Strip was no longer dominated by colorful casino bosses and family-owned resorts. Instead, Wall Street multinational hotel chains and megacorporations began moving in. Their arrival would change everything and erase much of the city's soul in the process. The new corporate mindset saw Vegas not as a community or a cultural phenomenon, but as an investment portfolio. Where old Vegas thrived on cheap meals, free perks, and legendary entertainment, the new era focused on one thing: maximizing revenue per customer. Casinos that once treated visitors like family now treated them like numbers on a balance sheet. The change was most visible in the demolition of the classics. Starting in the 1990s, iconic hotels that had defined the Strip for decades were systematically blown up in carefully choreographed implosions. The Dunes was reduced to rubble in 1993 to make way for the Bellagio. The Sands, once home to Sinatra, and the Rat Pack was leveled in 1996, so the Venetian could rise in its place. The Stardust, with its legendary neon sign, was imploded in 2007 to clear ground for what eventually became Resorts World. One by one, the neon palaces of Old Vegas disappeared, their history erased in plumes of dust and fireworks. To corporate executives, these demolitions were symbols of progress. To longtime Vegas fans, they were acts of betrayal. The city wasn't evolving, it was rejecting its own past. The character of the Strip shifted from quirky and soulful to glossy and corporate. The themed resorts of the 1990s and 2000s, Luxor, with its pyramid, Paris, Las Vegas, with its Eiffel Tower, New York, with its skyline, were impressive, but they lacked the intimacy and authenticity of Old Vegas. They were designed to impress shareholders as much as tourists. Even the atmosphere inside casinos began to change. Where once a tourist could walk into a lounge and see a local band for free, now entertainment became packaged and expensive. The era of the $4.99 steak dinner vanished, replaced by celebrity chef restaurants, where a single entree could cost $50. The focus wasn't on making everyone feel welcome, it was on extracting as much money as possible from every guest. Insiders noticed the shift immediately. One former casino manager famously said Vegas stopped being about magic the moment accountants started running the show. That statement captures the essence of the transformation. The Strip was no longer a place where ordinary Americans could rub shoulders with stars. It was becoming a luxury theme park for the wealthy, controlled by corporations that had little regard for the city's cultural roots. The impact wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Tourists who returned after decades often felt disoriented. The landmarks they remembered, Sands, Stardust, Desert Inn, were gone, replaced by glass towers that could have stood in any city. The Strip began to lose its uniqueness, trading its history for homogeneity. What was once unmistakably Vegas now looked more like a corporate shopping mall with slot machines. Meanwhile, locals watched in frustration as their city's identity was rewritten. Many had worked in the very hotels that were imploded. They remembered when Vegas had been wild, unpredictable, and deeply personal. Now it felt sterilized, stripped of character. The neon lights still flashed, but the heart that powered them had dimmed. By the early 2000s, the corporate takeover was complete. Old Vegas, with its smoky lounges, neon signs, and larger-than-life personalities, had been buried under the rubble of implosions. In its place stood a city that glittered brighter than ever, but felt emptier than before. The Strip had chosen profit over history, and in doing so, it betrayed the very past that made it famous. The proof that the Las Vegas Strip betrayed its own history is visible everywhere you look. Walk the boulevard today, and you'll find almost nothing left of the neon-soaked city that once defined the American dream. Instead, the Strip has become a case study in how corporate ambition can erase culture, leaving behind a polished shell that feels empty compared to what came before. Start with the most obvious change: the disappearance of the classics. In the space of 2 decades, nearly every historic resort that gave Vegas its identity was blown up. The Sands, once echoing with the voices of Sinatra and the Rat Pack, is now the Venetian, a massive complex of marble floors and shopping arcades that could easily exist in Dubai or Singapore. The Stardust, with its iconic neon sign and unforgettable shows, was replaced by Resorts World, a modern mega-resort that, while profitable, carries none of the spirit of the original. Even the Dunes Desert Inn Riviera and Sahara were either destroyed or gutted beyond recognition. Each implosion was celebrated as progress, but in truth, each was a funeral for the city's past. The betrayal runs deeper than demolished buildings. Old Vegas thrived on accessibility. Buffets for $5 free drinks at slot machines and cheap hotel rooms made the city a playground for everyone. Today, those traditions have been erased. Resort fees, valet charges, and parking costs nickel and dime visitors at every turn. The once legendary buffets have nearly vanished, replaced by luxury restaurants where the average tourist can't afford to eat. Instead of giving ordinary people a taste of excess, the Strip now demands excess just to enter the game. The gaming floors themselves tell the same story. Slots that once paid out in coins with the satisfying clink of metal have been replaced by sterile ticket machines. Minimum bets at tables have skyrocketed, pushing casual players out. In the old days, a couple with $50 could spend hours enjoying the casino atmosphere. Now that money can vanish in minutes. As one frustrated visitor put it, Vegas was built for dreamers. Now, it's built against them. Even the entertainment landscape has shifted. Where old Vegas offered free lounge acts, jazz bands, and quirky performances in smoky cocktail rooms, today's Strip sells tickets to high-production shows at prices that rival Broadway. Big-name residencies draw headlines: Celine Dion, Lady Gaga, Adele, but the small intimate performances that gave the city texture are gone. The culture of Vegas entertainment has been commodified, streamlined, and stripped of variety. And then there are the shops. The quirky gift stores, neon-lit diners, and roadside-style attractions have been bulldozed in favor of Louis Vuitton, Gucci, and Prada. These high-end brands look impressive on paper, but they rob the Strip of its uniqueness. You don't have to fly to Nevada to shop at Prada. You can do that in New York, Paris, or Los Angeles. Old Vegas was one of a kind. Today's Strip often feels interchangeable with any luxury mall in the world. The betrayal also lives in the city's marketing. Once Vegas proudly leaned into its identity as wild fun and unapologetic. The slogan, "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas," captured that spirit perfectly. Now the advertising emphasizes exclusivity, luxury, and curated experiences in an attempt to court wealthy elites while alienating the middle-class Americans who made the city what it was. Even the skyline betrays the past. The neon signs that once painted the night sky with character have been replaced by LED screens and digital billboards. They're brighter but colder. The artistry of handcrafted neon, preserved only in places like the Neon Museum, stands as a reminder of what has been lost. Put simply, the Strip has abandoned the very people who built its legend. It no longer belongs to the everyday dreamer, but to the corporations and investors who treat history as expendable. This isn't just evolution, it's erasure. And the proof is undeniable. The Strip has not just moved on from old Vegas, it has actively betrayed it. The loss of old Vegas isn't just about imploded buildings or fading neon. It's about the people who lived, worked, and built their lives around that history. When the Strip turned its back on its past, it also turned its back on the community that gave the city its character. The betrayal is felt most deeply not in corporate boardrooms, but in the memories and daily struggles of the locals. For longtime residents, the implosions of classic casinos were more than just construction projects. They were funerals. Generations of families worked at the Sands, Stardust, or Desert Inn, and when those places vanished, it felt like a part of their identity had been erased. One former cocktail waitress who had spent 20 years at the Sahara recalled watching its demolition in tears. "It wasn't just a job, it was my life. When they blew it up, it felt like they erased me too." These stories echo across the city, binding the community in a shared grief for a Vegas that no longer exists. The cultural memory of old Vegas is also fading. Younger generations born after the implosions grow up with no knowledge of the smoky lounges, neon signs, or Rat Pack showrooms that once defined the Strip. Instead, they inherit a version of Vegas built for corporate profits, not community spirit. The Neon Museum and Fremont Street Experience try to preserve fragments of history, but they feel more like theme parks than living traditions. What was once authentic has been relegated to curated nostalgia. The shift has created a psychological divide between locals and the Strip. For many residents, the Strip doesn't feel like their city anymore. Locals complain about being priced out, about hidden fees, and about a culture that no longer welcomes them. Where once they could take pride in showing off the Strip to visiting friends, now they avoid it altogether. As one lifelong resident put it, Vegas isn't ours anymore, it belongs to corporations and tourists. Small businesses have been hit especially hard. The quirky diners, family-owned bars, and independent entertainment venues that gave the city texture have been bulldozed or suffocated by rising rents. In their place stand sterile uniform outlets that could exist anywhere in the world. Locals who once made a living by offering something unique now find themselves shut out of the Strip's economy. This has consequences far beyond nostalgia. The decline of Old Vegas has contributed to a widening gap between rich and poor. While mega resorts boast record-breaking profits, Las Vegas consistently ranks among U.S. cities with high rates of homelessness and housing insecurity. Workers who once thrived on stable hospitality jobs now struggle to keep up with rent. Entire neighborhoods feel the weight of an economy that no longer serves them. The sense of shared prosperity that existed in the city's golden years has been replaced by corporate inequality. Even the city's identity on the global stage has shifted. Old Vegas represented freedom, rebellion, and a uniquely American form of glamour. The new Strip, while impressive, often feels like it could belong to any corporate-driven entertainment hub. Locals lament that Las Vegas has lost its voice, becoming just another product in a global marketplace. The betrayal is not just of history, but of the very idea of Vegas as something irreplaceable. And yet the memories linger. Older residents still tell stories of catching Elvis at the International of late nights, at the sands of neon signs lighting the desert sky. They remind anyone who will listen that Vegas once belonged to the people, not to corporations. But as time moves on, those voices grow quieter, drowned out by the hum of slot machines and the glow of LED screens. This is the human cost of the Strip's betrayal. It's not just about lost landmarks, it's about lost pride, lost community, and a city that no longer feels like home to those who built it. And, as the next chapter explores, the only question left is whether Old Vegas can ever be revived, or whether its death is final. The question that lingers over Las Vegas is whether any part of Old Vegas can ever come back, or whether its death is permanent. On the surface, it may seem impossible. The neon landmarks have been imploded, the cocktail lounges replaced by designer boutiques, and the cheap buffets swapped for $100 steak dinners. But beneath the corporate gloss, there are still sparks of resistance efforts to keep the old spirit alive. One of the clearest attempts is the Neon Museum, where dozens of iconic signs from demolished casinos now rest. Walking through its outdoor boneyard is like stepping into a graveyard of Vegas history, the Stardust's blazing starburst, the Sahara's cursive script, the Desert Inn's marquee. For locals and nostalgic visitors, the museum offers a way to reconnect with the soul of the city. But it's also bittersweet. These signs, once glowing on the Strip, now sit silent and broken relics of a world that corporations chose to erase. Another lifeline is downtown Las Vegas, particularly the Fremont Street Experience. Here you can still find some of the grit and eccentricity that once defined the city. Street performers, vintage casinos, and live bands attempt to capture the energy of Old Vegas. Bars like the Golden Nugget and El Cortez remain tied to the city's past, offering glimpses of what the Strip used to be. But Fremont is a fraction of what Old Vegas represented. It feels like a pocket of survival rather than a true revival. Some optimists believe that Old Vegas could return at least in spirit if the Strip re-embraced accessibility, reintroducing affordable entertainment, reducing hidden fees, and creating spaces where locals feel welcome could rebuild trust. But so far, corporations show little interest in turning back. Their focus remains on high rollers, international tourists, and luxury conventions audiences, who spend big but rarely form long-term loyalty. Even so, history shows that Las Vegas has always been a city of reinvention. When gambling was legalized in the 1930s, no one predicted it would become the entertainment capital of the world. When the Rat Pack brought glamour in the 1960s, no one knew those nights would define an era. And when corporate towers replaced neon icons in the 2000s, critics declared Vegas soulless, but the city still survives. That unpredictability leaves room for the possibility that someday a new version of Old Vegas could rise. The real question is whether people still want it. Many younger tourists don't remember the Sands Stardust or Desert Inn. To them, Vegas is Bellagio fountains, the Venetian canals, or the Sphere lighting up the desert sky. The culture of Old Vegas may survive in stories and museums, but not necessarily in lived experience. If demand doesn't exist, corporations won't rebuild it. Yet nostalgia remains powerful. Countless documentaries, photo books, and fan forums online prove that Old Vegas still captivates imaginations. Visitors who never even experienced it firsthand long for the authenticity it represented. There's a hunger for something real, something raw, something different from today's glossy luxury. If enough people demand it, there's always a chance the city will answer. In the end, whether Old Vegas can be revived depends less on neon signs and more on philosophy. The Strip would have to remember that it was built for the many, not just the few. It would need to honor its history instead of erasing it. Until then, the best we can do is preserve the memories, share the stories, and remind the world that the death of Old Vegas was not inevitable, it was a choice. And choices, as history shows, can always be rewritten. Old Vegas wasn't just a collection of casinos, it was a feeling, a rhythm, a promise that anyone could step off a plane in the desert and taste glamour for a night. That promise is gone. The Strip, once alive with neon and personality, has traded its soul for glass towers, resort fees, and corporate profit margins. In the process, it didn't just move forward, it betrayed its own history. The implosions of the Sands, Stardust, Desert Inn, and Dunes weren't just demolitions. They were goodbyes to a world that can never be rebuilt. But maybe the more important question isn't whether Old Vegas can return, it's whether we even recognize what's been lost. For some, the Strip today is still dazzling. For others, it feels hollow, like a museum of illusions built on broken promises. And that tension between nostalgia and reality, between memory and money, defines the city now more than ever. So what do you think? Was the death of Old Vegas inevitable, just part of modernization? Or was it a deliberate choice that stripped away the very culture that made Las Vegas legendary? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your stories, your memories, your verdict on the city that never sleeps. And if you found this deep dive worth your time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next untold story of Sin City. Because Vegas may never bring Old Vegas back, but we can make sure its history is never forgotten.